part of the world that isn't normally represented in the room. But then also to show what success looks like and to hear about that journey. And so we're really encouraged to have you with us today, as well as all the speakers we've had. You're in a wonderful line of STEM speakers. And by the way, to our students, we're recording these. These are on YouTube. These are linked through our STEM Center website. So we look forward to you being able to share these and pass these on. So I don't think I'll take much more time. The students will be rolling in, but just want to again, thank you again for spending the afternoon with us, and we really look forward to the conversation.
I'm excited for the offer from Dr. Nino. It was exciting to see it, exciting to get picked. So I'm hoping that we can have some really good conversations and hopefully unveil some of the uncertainties people might have about getting a PhD, what engineering looks like after undergrad, and just be able to share my story.
Thank you.
That's awesome. So I'm gonna spotlight you right away. As Paul was saying, we are expecting a few students to roll out soon, and then I know we have a strong Umoja community. I don't know if you're familiar with that, and they're finish up their meeting in a few minutes. So I'm pretty sure we'll see more of that coming in as well. So I would say, Paul, what do you think? Another couple of minutes, and then we can start.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So here it
and
is.
if it's okay, while that's happening, I could just show our STEM website and what's been happening there. Okay.
So I'm gonna remove the spotlight here.
You can help me enable screen sharing.
Oh yeah, sorry about
that. No problem at all.
Go for it.
Okay. So just as a reminder to folks, let's bring it in. Should be, oh, it's not working. Let's try one more time. Okay, so there we are today. We have our just our ongoing links. And if you're interested in going back to past speakers, oh, it's not showing up here. We'll go to the syllabus here. Across the top, for folks who are unfamiliar, we do have our STEM speaker series. You can click in there and see all the other faculty and scientists and researchers who've joined us. I'll also put in a plug while she's here with us. Dr. Emily Fox, who's our bio faculty here at COM, is going to give us an update on COVID-19. So that's next Monday, April 5th, during the community hour, 12:40. We'll, of course, send a link out to everyone, but feel free to come by with your lunch. That should be a nice conversation to meet Dr. Fox, but also to get any questions answered about the vaccine and, of course, just personal questions about her journey to become a community college faculty member. So that's just a plug for next week's STEM speaker event. And then just want to remind students as well, we've had some good turnout and applications for summer internships. This page is always being updated. We're reaching the end of our application cycle with the end of March here. There's just the last couple ones that have been applied for recently, but keep your eye open, especially if you're not transferring from COM this coming summer. There are great opportunities to begin to do term time research, summertime research, and we're happy, Dr. Nino and I, to write supporting letters of rec and in all of these disciplines, ranging from physics and astronomy to chemistry to geology to various forms of biology. So if you're in a STEM field, there's even some math work that can be done. Here's a little internship experience link from Jenna Nicholas that some of you all know, and you're welcome to click in there and read about Jenna's experience. And then finally, the scholarship link is still somewhat in progress, but there are some rolling scholarships available for STEM students, including through the Department of Defense, Latinos in Tech. That was a scholarship one of our STEM students actually won last year, and that has a rolling admission. And then finally, there are a couple there's one more that's coming up for California residents in community college. So reach out to me if you're interested in anything here through the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. So that's a little introduction, and then we are considering how to prep ourselves for some of our activities. It may not happen this semester, but how the fall is going to look. And if you're interested in helping to plan out some fall activities, reach out to me as well. So we'll go ahead and stop here.
Thank you, Paul. And I think we can start. As I said, people will trickle in. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to start recording for now. Is it okay for you, Karis, if I record this?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so welcome, everybody. This is our last speaker for the Women History Month. It's been a great 2 months of speaker series, and will continue here at STEM Learning Community at College of Marin. And today we have the honor to host, may I say, Dr. Karis Boyd-Sinkler, who is going to take on a very difficult task and very challenging, I'm pretty sure, but exciting, to be the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Pratt School of Engineering at Duke University. She honor her presence today. She will tell us more about her journey as a scientist, as a Black woman in the sciences, and how what she learned, what she did in her academic trajectory, and what bring her to this new adventure coming up this year as bringing forward such an important role to increase diversity, equity, and inclusion in the academic world. As a scientist myself, I can say this has been going to be challenging, but so much needed in these years of reckoning. So thank you very much and welcome, Dr. Boyd-Sinkler.
Thank you so much for that great introduction. I was like, I'm happy it's being recorded so I can remember to introduce myself that way for future meetings. But thank you again for having me. I'm super excited to be here and to share with you all my story, or as I almost like to consider it, a journey. I know when I thought about engineering, it definitely wasn't as linear as I thought it was going to be. So I'm going to share some slides just to help really take you along through my academic journey into my current role here at Duke. So you should be able to see my slides. So again, I'm going to start off by doing a quick outline, just talking about my journey as a Black woman in STEM, and then going through some of my current diversity, equity, inclusion efforts, and then hopefully some Q&A. But again, if we want to jump around with Q&A while I'm talking, I'm completely flexible with that. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. So a little bit about my journey, a little bit about me. I'm originally from Hampton, Virginia, which is on the eastern coast near the beach. So I grew up love going to the beach. It was about maybe 10 minutes from my house. And my family is very large. So the picture on the bottom, my mother is the youngest of 10 kids. And so this is a picture of all of my first cousins. So I have first cousins ranging from ages 52, 53, all the way to as young as being in 8th grade. So a wide range of first cousins, a very big family, so lots of love and support. And so coming from a smaller area in Virginia, I was excited to go to college. Definitely didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I knew engineering was going to be something that would help propel me. I know actually growing up, I wasn't a kid who went to a lot of summer science camps. I actually attended a lot of vacation Bible school programs, lots of sports camps, doing gymnastics. So I didn't really have the biggest idea of what engineering was. It actually wasn't until I was helping my uncle, who was a handyman, build a deck. And I was like, wow, this is exciting. What is this? And he's like, this is engineering. And I was like, huh. This is pretty cool, because in my head, I thought I wanted to be a pastry chef the whole time. So it wasn't until I was a junior in high school where someone told me about engineering. So I was almost playing catch up from that very moment to figure out, what is engineering? What is it like? What does it mean? What do you do? I know you have a calculator, but what else? And so it was a fun way to really figure out what engineering was going to be like. And so that took me to the University of Virginia, where I majored there in engineering, and I was really active in lots of affinity groups. So like the National Society of Black Engineers, was really involved with that because that for me felt like a home away from home. The area where I grew up in, it was predominantly a Black populated city. So even my high school, we had one of the lowest retention rates on the peninsula, around 64%. So essentially that means when your professor or your principal might have told you, look to your left and look to your right, one person might not be here when you graduate. That was actually something that happened in my high school. So when I was a freshman in high school, we started off with around 500 students, but when I graduated, there was only about 230. So that just shows you how much of a excitement that I had to attend college. And then also just when it came to not knowing where to turn, which way to go, really trying to figure out that as well. And I see Dwayne, you're from Virginia as well. So congratulations, or not congratulations, but I'm excited to talk to you as someone also from Virginia. So I was at UVA, had an excellent time. Unfortunately, I didn't have the best academic skills when it came into there. I know I struggled a bit academically. I was actually put on academic probation. So even that was a big, huge hurdle financially, trying to figure out if I'm going to stay at school another year, if I'm going to take a semester off. So a lot of finding myself out, finding my journey. Do I really want to be an engineer? I know I thought about being a pastry chef, so is it too late to change? So I went through a lot of really trying to figure out what did I want to do? Where did I see myself and what did I want to be? And ultimately I decided engineering is where I want to stay. Engineering is what I want to be. And so I ended up graduating there in 2014 with my bachelor's in engineering science, and I got minors in material science and biomedical engineering. So really exciting, but unfortunately, I was probably one of the few people who graduated without a job. So imagine that, going to a great institution, being put on academic probation, and when you're trying to apply to jobs, look for jobs, I'm seeing that 3.0 GPA and I'm like, that doesn't fit me. I can't do this. So because my family is so big and I was like, I don't really want to go home, I want to be free and explore, I decided to move to Richmond, Virginia. And there I worked 4 different jobs. So there I was an instructional assistant in the K-12 public school system. I was a gymnastics coach for a local middle school. Since I taught gymnastics when I was in high school, I was like, I can do this still. I was also a tutor with a tutoring company. And then I worked for a company called Engineering for Kids. And that whole time it was really trying to figure out, what am I going to do? How am I going to make it work? I wanted to do more school, but I was still trying to figure out how can I still be an engineer? So lots of exploring and figuring stuff out. And then one day I got a call from the director at the University of Virginia, and she was in charge of we have actually an office that's centered around students who are diverse in engineering. So mostly our multicultural students. So if you might identify as a Black student or Hispanic Latino or women in engineering, we have an office that's centered around providing activities that are catered to students who have those identities. And so she called me up one day and she's like, I was just thinking about you, trying to see how things are going. And I was like, it's kind of stressful. I'm trying to figure out where to go, how to make ends meet. I'm thinking about maybe being a teacher, because one of the things that I loved about being in Richmond was teaching. I was teaching students in grades kindergarten through 5th grade math. So it was almost like a excitement level of my passion that I can do this. I can be an engineer. I know I had a couple hiccups, at UVA, but this is something I want to do. I can make it work. And she said, you know what? We have a couple of summer camps. Do you think you could come help and run them? And I was like, of course, I'd love to. So I went back to UVA and I started working there in the summer camp office. And then she's like, you've done such a great work. What if we keep you on for a year? And I was like, thank you so much. I'll gladly take this opportunity. But she said, if I take you on, you have to promise me you'll apply to graduate school. And I was like, oh dear, more school. I just got out of school. I didn't have a good GPA. My GPA was a 2.6. How in the world am I going to get into graduate school when they want a 3.0? They want to have research experience. They want to see this. I'm like, I don't know if I can do it. She's like, well, if you want the offer, you're going to have to take it. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I can make this work. And so she's like, we'll take you on temporary, just to see how you do in the office. And so in that role, I ended up helping students when it came to creating resumes, really helping with professional development, helped create a tutoring program, and really trying to promote some alumni mentoring. So it's really exciting to see, like, oh yes, I can help students. I'm helping people like me, but I'm being that person. I wish somebody was there for me, but I didn't know that existed. So this role was really fulfilling for me. And I was trying to figure out, okay, well, which program do I apply to? And she was like, if you want to stay in this space working with diverse students, really helping them succeed in engineering, you have to go work at Virginia Tech under Dr. Beverly Watford. She's amazing. She has done so much when it comes to student support and helping people. I was like, okay. And that was the only school I applied to, the only program that I applied to, which was also very risky looking back. And I took her advice and I applied, and I was very fortunate to get in. And so that's where I'm somewhat currently. I'm on my way out, but when I was at Virginia Tech in graduate school, I learned so much as far as having to relearn a lot of things that I thought, oh, I just do this because it works, but actually understanding the research behind different things that my professors might do, things my professors might say. And so I really enjoyed that opportunity there. And I'm still learning and growing. Working, I just finished up my master's degree in industrial and systems engineering at Virginia Tech. And now in May 5th, I'll actually be defending my PhD in engineering education. And so I'm super excited to be done. My dissertation research is focused on looking at the interpersonal relationships that Black men utilize in undergraduate engineering programs. So essentially the way I like to think about it is a lot of people, we have different relationships that we lean on, whether that's family, whether that's your peers, your friends from high school. But when it comes to Black men, I'm trying to understand which relationships do they utilize to get through engineering and succeed. And so my research is showing that, especially with things like COVID that's going on and lots of national events, things like Black Lives Matter, which relationships are valuable to students, and then how are they valuable? So my research right now is talking a lot about seeing relationships or having a sense that people care about them, and relationships where people feel like they're gaining some type of knowledge or information, and also a sense of relatability. So those are like the three main areas. And so I'm excited to hopefully finish. And I'm also now concurrently working at Duke as the director of diversity, equity, inclusion in their School of Engineering. And so in that role, essentially, I'm taking a lot of my classes, my foundation from Virginia Tech, from UVA, and essentially making it 10 times bigger. So I'm thinking about programs not only for undergraduate students, but also programs for faculty and staff, as well as postdocs. And so I'm really trying to look at how can we affect a whole entire community from like an ecosystem type of lens. And I have a question that sounds interesting. Do I have a source bank or list of publications we can access? I do have a list of publications, and I will be happy to share them with you. If you want to type your name in the chat, your email in the chat box, I can email them to you directly, and also can share them with Dr. Nino at the end as well.
Thank you very much. And I
Yeah.
should say that if you guys, for the people that just joined a little bit later, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and either we'll answer right away. Thank you very much, Karis, for looking at the chat, or if you want, we can tell me when you want to stop, and I'll bring the questions to you in bulk if you prefer. But please do as you please.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so this is essentially my journey so far. It isn't linear. I know it looks linear on paper, and I know a lot of that's just from really trying to fine tune what I really care about. But a lot of it happened because somebody believed in me and someone was willing to say, I think you can be this. I think you are better than where you might see yourself as right now. And so in my role at Duke, that's a lot of what I really hope to inspire to do. But I want to do it in a very systematic process. So when I think about when it comes to making programs or how we're talking to students or even faculty, staff, postdocs, I really try to look at this link of research to practice. And a lot of that is how I look at it, is because if I can have this great program, how can I make sure it's good? You know, if research says, you know, certain students like to have role models, well, how am I making sure that it's the students that I want to target for this program? And so a lot of the ways that I look at diversity, equity, inclusion is making sure that we're very intentional and we can actually put DEI efforts at the center of what we're doing. So I'm going to walk you through an example of like a way you can be very intentional about embedding DEI in a course, but I do want to stop for questions.
I do have a question, Karis. What is the role? You mentioned the NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineer, right? And recently, as a physicist myself and former HBCU faculty, we try to interact with these societies, right? The NSBE or the NSBP, the National Society of Black Physicists. Can you say a few words about the role? You mentioned something briefly, but can you elaborate more on the role of this society for people of color, for example, and help you going over those bumps and on the road in academics, for example?
Yeah, exactly. So I was really involved with NSBE. It was a really great resource for me because it was a lot of people who looked like me, and I was even able to interact with people who were from my own hometown. So it was a great support network for me, and then also it helped me develop my professional skills when it came to presenting at conferences and feeling comfortable of who I am and creating a bigger sense of that I belong. And so NSBE is a very, very, very big organization, but I highly recommend you to be involved in it. Or I know that if you don't necessarily identify with that particular affinity group, there's a Society for Hispanic Professional Engineers, SHEP, and there's Society for Women Engineers, and you also have SOCNIS, which is for Native Americans. So there's lots of different groups and a great way to get connected. They also have conferences each year, and that's a great place when it comes to looking and wanting to talk with companies that actually want to hire you. They want to hire you and your authentic self. So it's a great way to feel like you're with your people in a relaxed environment, but they can understand when you're trying to explain different things about, I might have had these hiccups, but look, this is where I'm doing right now. And so NSBE has been very integral, especially even as a graduate student. So when it came to me looking for fellowships or scholarships in graduate school, I applied to a very big one from the National Science Foundation. And I was actually able to get the director, Carl Reed of NSBE, to write one of my letters of recommendations for that fellowship. And I was happily awarded that fellowship. And I know a lot of my efforts around NSBE was because of seeing his leadership as well as other people around me. Yeah.
And congratulations, Paul, clapping. I second that. I know how challenging and competitive is the NSF fellowship, the graduate student fellowship. So congratulations on that. On the same note, I was wondering if you could say a few words about when you were at Virginia Tech and this mentor of yours asked you to apply for a grad program, right? You said you write one application, which is absolutely super risky. Never recommend that. Let me make it clear. But what I would ask you is, can you give a suggestion? If you have to name like one or two suggestions to a student, our students, of course, are in a community college, so they will transfer into, a four-year institution, but still they will face that challenge eventually to apply to graduate program, master's program, and so forth. What do they have to look for, like in terms of a mentor or someone that gives you the advice that you need to, apply to that fellowship program, master's program, whatever?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice that I would try to say is try to think of where you might see yourself or where you want to see yourself in a couple of years and see if you can find that person. I know it's really hard to think about, like, how am I supposed to find somebody to help lead and guide me if I don't know what I want to do yet? So sometimes it can seem like a chicken or egg conversation as to find that person. But if there is an interest that you have, whether that's machine learning, trying to do a Google search and seeing like who might be interested or doing research in that field and starting that as a conversation to understand more about who are the big people who are publishing papers, who's going to conferences, who's leading different awards, to really understand what the field looks like. So that way, when you're having these conversations, you don't have to feel like, I don't know what I'm talking about. You have the confidence, you have the technical jargon, even if it takes to have these conversations. So I definitely say to try to look and understand what is it that you might want to do. Now, you don't have to make a final decision as, oh, I want to be, this person in this industry, but even if it's just an idea to have that conversation, because knowing what you don't want to do is just as good as knowing what you do want to do. So be okay that some people might be a little bit harder to get in touch with. It just might mean that's not the person for you to reach out to. But if there's someone who who might be plugged into a school or who might know, or even following up with conversations, do you know anybody else I should reach out to? I'm really thinking about this. Is there anyone in your network who you can put me in touch with, or that I can reach out to on my own through LinkedIn or other ways? And so a lot of it is reaching out to understand if this is space for you. I know for myself, I was on the fence if I really want to do graduate school. I know having that job really propelled me to apply, but also as I started working more and learning more, that I need to have a PhD to stay in this space and also to be credible in what I'm saying is a good way to think about how we approach DEI efforts. So a lot of it is making sure that you reach out to somebody. And it's okay if you have to reach out to more than one person, that's perfectly fine. Feel free to lean on other people who might know someone else. So let's say you really want to be interested in biology, talking to your biology professor. Do you know of anybody? Have you seen anybody? Are there anybody at a neighboring school who I could talk to? And so trying to use that as a way to get an idea or understanding of, is this the type of lifestyle that I might want one day? Do I want to have a research group? Because like for me, while I do love and enjoy research, I don't necessarily want to have a research group. I like interacting with people face to face and making these meaningful relationships. And that's what excites me. That's what gets me up every morning, what's making me pour my hot cup of coffee, even though I might be tired. And so finding what that is for you is what's probably going to be the hardest part of it. But once you find it, it's going to be very rewarding. Definitely
Great.
say.
And I know I'm going to let you move on, but one final question that came up, and we always ask this question in the last 2 months a lot to our speakers, has been you decided to go in engineering. And, maybe being at Virginia, University of Virginia, Virginia Tech, you didn't see this, but have you seen challenges for you to be a Black person in an engineering field, or even more probably being a Black woman surrounded by probably more male engineers? Can you speak about that and how you cope with that if you found some difficulties?
Yeah. No, I experience that about every day, honestly, and especially going to a predominantly white or historically white institution. You are faced with a lot of those experiences day in and day out. And some people, they might not be intentional with those efforts, and some of them may be intentional. But regardless, I hate to say that it's part of the experience, but I want to say that people are in places like myself to change that culture. So it's something that you don't have to face moving forward. With that being said, yes, there have been difficult times. I know in my intro to engineering course, my engineering 101, it was a class of 20 or 25, I'd say, and I was the only Black person in my class. And every single day we had class, my professor would take attendance, but he would never call my name. And I was so confused. I was like, well, I hope he's marking my name. And I went up to him one day and I was like, I'm in class, right? Like, you don't call my name on the attendance roll. He's like, oh, well, I know when you're not here. And I was like, oh, okay, this is good to know, but also kind of scary. But you know what? I'm going to prove why you should know my name, why you should call my name on the roll. And so, unfortunately, at some schools and a lot of schools, you might face a lot of those challenges and barriers. But that's when I leaned on organizations like NSBE. I definitely know my family a lot. And it was hard sometimes because I'm talking to my mother like, you won't believe what I just experienced or what I just saw. And she's kind of like, oh my gosh, you need to come home. Like, I'm going to protect you from them. And I was like, no, I don't want to go home. Please don't bring me home. I want to learn. But also, I think a lot of it was being in this role, seeing myself as a student and having to navigate those challenges. It makes me even more so push creating more support structures for students that are for the students and help them. So I know for some of my friends, like they chose to go to a historically Black college and university, an HBCU, which is an excellent idea. I know my mother and father both attended those types of institutions and had an enjoyable experience. And for myself, I didn't necessarily at the time want that in my undergrad experience, but looking back, I definitely will say, that would have been a great experience to have. So I think a lot of it is really figuring out what type of support you're looking for. I know for myself, when I chose UVA, I was thinking, you know what, when I graduate, I know I'll have a job, but you saw how that happened. I didn't necessarily have the best job, but I was thinking more so about the end product and not necessarily thinking about the whole experience. And I think when it comes to thinking about college and grad school, thinking about your whole college experience, not just the end part of a job, because as you see, I eventually made it to Duke, even though it wasn't a linear trajectory, I still ended up there. But really thinking about for you, what is most enjoyable. For me, I did not join a sorority. I like to say that NSBE was my unofficial fraternity just because it was, especially at UVA, one of the larger groups on campus and full of people who weren't even engineering majors. So that kind of gave me that sense of comfort there. But yeah, it definitely is hard. So again, there's lots of people who know what you're experiencing and feeling. So within NSBE, I would lean on them. Do you have experiences with this person, or do you feel this way sometimes? And a lot of it is really trying to wrestle with what is okay for you and what is, I cannot survive, or I need to get help, whether that's emotionally, mentally, whether that's academically. And so it's a hard process to figure out at such a time, especially with COVID going on. But I do encourage, really trying to understand what is it that you need to succeed and thrive in an environment, especially in college, and what college is going to give you that space. Even when it's going to a 2-year, another 4-year college, if you really want to be able to go home on weekends, and that's a core feature, looking for a program that has those elements, so you don't have to feel like you're sacrificing your authentic self in order to fit into a college or cultural norm that existed before you were even born. And so probably my best answer.
Thank you very much. It's really, really great. Thank you. I promise I have no more questions.
No. I like questions, and it helps break up the conversation, so it's all good.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You described this kind of very singular focus on being an engineer and presented with the option of a pastry chef, right? Can you describe a time in your experience when the hurdles seem so great and the dream seems so dim, and what did you do in that moment? Where did you find the strength, or where did you find the supply to keep the dream alive?
Yeah, let me think. I was like, there's quite a few, but I'm trying to think of a very dim spot. Would probably be when I was at the University of Virginia. I'm thinking about that time when I got put on academic probation. I know during that semester it was really challenging for me. I found out that my mother had got diagnosed with cancer. Um, and it was just really hard. I was trying to travel back to see her and visit her, but then also balance academics. And I was like, it was just a lot going on. And then when I got that letter saying that you are on academic probation, I felt like my whole world was crumbling on me. I was trying to understand why, like, what happened? Why me? Why did this happen to me? And I was cried a lot. I cried to my mom. And then also, it was a different space because with both of my parents attending HBCUs, both of them, they had a different experience than me. So when I'm trying to relate to them, some things are just not getting. And even then, both of my parents, they were both on academic probation when they were in college. And so I know my father, he was actually took a whole semester off and went to another college. And for my mother, she took a semester off. So when it came to me, it was almost like, well, you're taking time off. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. So in that time, I really felt alone, like nobody would be there to support me, trying to figure out, okay, what can I do to prove that I belong? What can I prove to UVA that I belong? What can I prove to my parents that I belong? And then to myself. Because a lot of it's your own internal balance. You see that letter and you see, okay, I have a semester to get my GPA up. You're trying to figure out, okay, what classes do I need to take? How do I do it? And luckily there was the same person who reached out to me when I was in Richmond, the director of our Center for Diversity and Engineering. And she said, I went to her and I was like, can I just talk? I don't know what I need to do, what I need to do to get on track. And she was like, okay, get a piece of paper. We're going to plan out this schedule for you. These are the classes you really need to take. We're going to take a lighter load this year. And when it comes to doing homework, you're coming to my office. You're coming and sitting and doing your homework. And we're treating this like an 8 to 5 job, essentially. She's like, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. You have your classes for this. And we had this big calendar that we did together on a dry erase board just to figure out, okay, how am I going to get myself back on track? And it was a hard journey. I know there are times she would be texting me, where are you? I haven't seen you today. Technically, you're supposed to be in this office doing your homework. And I was like, darn it, I gotta go back in there. But having that person to be on me, it soon became easier. And then I was like, okay, I have the hang of this. I can do this. And then being in NSBE, I was like, you know what, let's go here. Let's have a study group. We do have this chemistry test. Let me study a bit by myself first, and then let me go to the study group. So even then I was learning skills on the job, but then I was able to help those around me say, you know what, let's get ourselves together. Let's get this 4.0 GPA, or at least as close to it as we can. And so hitting active probation and trying to balance it out, being scared I'm going to get kicked out of the school, and then knowing I have 1 semester to get it back up, or what am I going to do? I just made all these great friends. So that was probably a dim time for me, but slowly over time, it started changing. The wheels started turning on how do I actually study, I still pull all-nighters, but knowing that I don't need to pull an all-nighter to prove that I'm an engineer, so a lot of this really combating with what does it mean to be an engineer, and really trying to say, no, this is what Karis wants to do. Karis didn't have this exposure, so Karis wanted to be a pastry chef, and I still love to enjoy to cook today. So it's not like it's completely gone, but also just really seeing what does Karis need to succeed, and then asking people, does this make sense? Is this okay? Because I don't want to go the wrong way, but I just need your guidance to make sure that this is how I should be doing it. And so I definitely wasn't in a Karis knows everything. I definitely thought I knew the world. And then a lot of people and Get On Vibration really brought me back down to earth. But I know my uncle, one of the first things, the one who taught me how to build a deck, first things he said was, Karis, you can work for 4 years and play the rest of your life, or play for 4 years and work the rest of your life. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that hurt my soul. But I understand where you're coming from, and I need that level of kick in the boot to get myself back on track. And so, yeah. We also have another question. Study tips, passing exams, getting a tutor, and join a study group. Yes.
You answered it, Doctor. You answered the question. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
No problem. No problem. But yeah, are there any other questions? I was like, we can keep it here and I can just talk about my experience. I do have another, just walking through an example of how you can intentionally embed DEI, and like when you're thinking about developing a course or curriculum, just for some other members in case they want to understand. But
absolutely, Karis, please take it on.
Okay, so this is an example for that I thought of, and it's essentially focused on combating the sophomore slump. So essentially the sophomore slump is for a lot of students, normally in their sophomore year of college, but sometimes in their freshman year, they kind of get disinterested in college and engineering. What they thought was engineering really isn't engineering. You start taking some of those major specific classes and it's like, oh, this is a lot more than I realized, that I saw on like TV shows. And so from here, I was like, okay, if I wanted to create something to target students who are facing the sophomore slump, what would it be? But I want it to be innovative. I don't want it to just be another program. I want it to be novel. I want to work with various stakeholders in different areas. And I really want it to be a sense of a community for students. And so essentially what I thought of was, okay, I have my goals and objectives. So really trying to outline what clear things do I want this idea or this program to establish. And then I was like, okay, well, who's my audience? Who are these people that I'm talking about? And so for me, I was thinking, okay, myself, having that low first and or second semester GPA, students who might have come to me, or even students that might be identified by other faculty members. I think they might need something to help boost their morale. And then what would I have students? How would I make it engaging? How would I make it something that they could actually take and use? So I was thinking about, I really want to focus on grit and perseverance, because I feel like for me, you need that in every day when you have waves of tests that for some reason always seem to happen during the same week at times. And then also really getting back to engineering. So what was it that excited engineering for me, or when I first thought this is engineering, was building a deck. It was a very hands-on, a very project or problem-based learning. And so I was like, okay, definitely want some type of hands-on interactive feature. And then also I want to put diversity and ethics into it, because a lot of programs, they wait until you're about to graduate before they say, here, think about people, bring people back at the very end, but how can we be intentional about thinking about people? And then also just having some type of mentorship. And so a lot of it, when I thought about grit and perseverance, I thought about my class in college talking about motivation. And it talks about this idea of being in flow. And think of flow as this euphoric state where, let's say you're working or playing a video game and you completely lose track of time and you look up and you're like, oh my gosh, it's 7 o'clock. That is essentially flow. And so I was like, I want something that's going to excite students and bring them back to that sense of flow. And then I was also like, okay, I want it to be an actual problem. So I was like, okay, it would be really cool, and this is just for a mock, if you got to solve a real world problem in an area that's a school district that's local to you. So I was like, okay, that'd be really cool if it was like, what if you got to work with a K-12 instructor who's teaching a class, and really working with the K-12 instructor to see how can I help your students? So you're not even talking with the teacher, you're also talking with the students in the classroom, figuring out, okay, what are your needs? And then working together with the instructor to find an appropriate deliverable that could be used. And it's exciting because you get to get back to those nuts and bolts that you might think of when you think of engineering. And then I wanted to have this exposure to diversity and ethics. I was like, okay, how do we embed this in? And I was like, case studies. So case studies is essentially a great way to bring in diversity and ethics and really thinking about the people. And so this is like an example, let's say for material science, thinking about mitigating the effects of prolapse, or for if you're a biomedical engineer, thinking about untreated syphilis. So like with the Tuskegee studies. So using historical example as a way to say, you know what, this is something that actually happened. How might if we had looked at this lens with diversity or ethics, or what if it was a different population of people? So having these probing conversations, so it's not just like a, yeah, we did it, let's move on, but what can we learn so we don't repeat it again? So asking questions like, well, how did power dynamics, influence? If it was a different racial and ethnic group involved, would it have been a different sort of outcomes? And then also like what costs should come when you're thinking about developing for the future of healthcare. So more probing questions to get people to really grapple instead of just, looking at everything like it's a billboard and I say hi and I keep going past it, but really wrestle and grapple with, what does diversity mean to you? And also ethics, which isn't always a checkbox of yes or a checkbox of no. And then lastly, I wanted to add an idea of mentorship. So having graduate students and undergraduate students having some type of evaluation process where I'm learning from those ahead of me. Because I know a lot of times we as students might say, well, I'm taking this class and I don't understand how this affects me to be X type engineer. I'm taking this statics class. Will I really use this in the future? Because so-and-so told me all they do is play with Excel spreadsheets. And so this idea of mentorship will help bring different dynamics of what will this look like moving forward in your trajectory as a student. And then also you want to think about how does it develop you as a student. So you're leaning on those deeper levels of motivation. You're getting that sense of community from other majors. You're getting exposure to a capstone project before you're graduating. So when it comes to, things to put on your resume or CV, you can say, I've done this project. I've worked with these stakeholders and this was the outcome. So it's also advancing your CV resume as well. And then also intentional efforts to see diversity embedded with it. So it's not just an afterthought or, oh, we're going to add it here as a very endpoint to touch on, but it's very intentional from the beginning. And then also it's getting back to that practice space. How do we bring it back to research? So looking at ABET, so your accreditation standards for engineering, what does this idea hit? So the main ones that I picked was 4 different ones. So more so talking about communicating effectively with a broad range of audiences. So with that program, you're working with instructors as well as students who might be older or younger than you, thinking about applying engineering design with a global emphasis and a variety of competing and prioritizing factors. So you can't just look at it as this one case study or this one picture perfect level of a question to look at. And then also really trying to push those ethical and professional responsibilities to the forefront. And then also working as a team, which as engineers, you will work on lots of teams. And then also adding another layer of theory. So where my background in engineering education comes from, looking at Tinto's theory of institutional departure. He's this amazing person who has created this great big theory to essentially say, these are essentially the 5 big reasons why students leave when it comes to college. And so this program would help mostly target the latter 3 about receiving feedback about performance, so how they're doing, academic and social integration, so within the larger community, and then relevant learning, because a lot of times you don't get those real world problems or wicked problems, as sometimes people like to call them. And so, yeah, that was essentially kind of walking through an example of how you can be very intentional, but also it's a big, big idea, but kind of making it into smaller, movable pieces so you can understand, okay, this is where I want to embed this is where this fits, this is where this, and then reusing theory and accreditation standards back into the whole design process.
This is very, very interesting, Karis. Thank you very much. And actually, most of this is applicable beyond engineering. I see myself as a physicist. I'm pretty sure Paul, and Emily can speak about chemistry as well and biochemistry. I do have a couple of questions for you, and the first one is about these one of these key programmatic features that you mentioned earlier, and also the informal mentorship. Do you have any sense of the effectiveness of these either the mentorship or other activities on race, right? So you're thinking about mentors, and we always, for me, is always bringing role models that look like the students I'm my target. Right, so a Black engineer to Black students, a Latino astronomer to Latino students, but of course not limited to that. Do you have a sense of what would be the most effective, mentorship activities or engaging partnerships?
Sure. I think the biggest thing when you think about mentorship is making sure you have buy-in. So whether that's some type of contract that you have when it comes to, okay, if I'm a part of this mentoring program, what do I get out of it? Whether that's monetary, whether that's credit, whether that's you need to attend X number of professional development events that we host, some type of tying back to why the student needs to participate is definitely needed. I know research has said when it comes to having mentors and role models, a big piece of that is a sense of relatability. So while having someone who's the same sex or gender as you is definitely great, and some students gravitate toward that, some students might not. So a lot of it is a little bit harder to figure out what will work, but a lot of it's exposing it to, I know, one example that we did at Virginia Tech was we have a diversity scholars mentoring program. And 1 year for that, when I was in charge of helping facilitate who's going to be mentors for the program and mentees, we actually did kind of like a mix and mingle where you had name tags, which says if you're a mentor mentee, and it was essentially an open environment for you to talk. We had different questions, different prompts to get people talking. And then at the end, we had people rank 1 to 3 who were your top 3 mentors, who were your top 3 mentees for the other group, and essentially kind of corroborated and said, okay, this might be a good mentoring group. Because while you might think, oh, I really like this person in the social setting, it could have been because that person might have been overly talkative, and then it might be a completely different thing in another setting. So we followed up with having PowerPoint slides, which just said like name, background, major, and interests, and kind of use those ways to figure out that sense of relatability as a way to pair different people when it came to mentors. But I would say a big thing is having some type of buy-in, especially as a mentor. It's like, okay, what am I going to do? Is it meeting with them more than once a month? Is it once a month? Are you providing the event? What level of engagement you want the students to have with a mentor? Because I know sometimes older students or students who have families might not feel as interested to want to be fully engaged because they're like, do not want to go out. I have a family to take care of. I need to do X, Y, Z. So a lot of it is creating a variety of people who can speak to different attributes. So I know like for myself, since I didn't go straight from undergrad to college when I was a mentor, sometimes I had students who had been out of school for a couple of years. So our conversations might have centered around, how does it feel writing again? Or even sometimes of like, I used to work this big job, but now I'm not making as much money. Like, how did you balance it? How did you have a budget? So a lot of it's trying to find people where you can create a sense of relatability is what I found has been key so far, just from research and then also practice. I'm having run a few programs.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Well, I did have, I know I participated a lot in the chat. I think it's pretty cool that you're here. I think it's a blessing that you're here. What I try to do, is have something that people can relate to around activities like sports groups. And I found, I have brothers, I found that if you use the language of something that's more along the athletic lines, I find, I don't know what it is, but I find sometimes that when girls and boys are together and it's something academic, they might feel a little intimidated if there's a girl in the room. Part of it is upbringing, like they don't want to, overshadow you, or they don't want you to overshadow them, et cetera, et cetera. But I found if you use sports analogies, or if you're doing the team sport thing, it helps to break the ice. And then when you're in groups, it seems like there's more kind of a congeniality going on. Have you observed that in your research? Because you did say you're focusing on Black men. I hope I understood that correctly. Have you found that to be effective?
I know when it's come to, at least looking at my research, a lot of it's just been more so, I guess, relations have been about relatability. So like you said, it could be sports, trying to figure out what that is. I know I've had some professors, when it comes to even forming groups, they'll actually have the students do a poll based off of their availability to meet. So that way you kind of take away some of those preconceived notions or, oh, I want to work with this person over that person. And it's saying you're grouped based off of, you can all meet on Tuesdays at 5 o'clock. And that's a great time for you all to meet. So I know some people I've seen have kind of worked around trying to always use something like a tangible item or sense of relatability, or like birthdays or your favorite color as a way to group different groups. So I've seen a couple of those things as well. But I think sports is a great way. And also it captures the attention of the students because it says that I want to get to know you. I value you. I see you in the class. And I think a lot of that goes into culturally relevant pedagogy, when it talks about, really putting the student at the center and having a student-centered approach. So I've seen some professors in their courses, they will do the index card where they'll ask the students a bunch of questions, and one of the questions will ask, what's your favorite type of music? And so the first 5 minutes of class, the professor will rotate different types of music that the students have stated. So it creates a sense of warmth. My professor's actually, he read the cards, it might spark a conversation. You mentioned you like X band, you like Bruce Springsteen, this is a song, have you heard from it? So it can also create more lines of connections across.
Thank you, Karis. Karis, can you go back a couple of slides? There was something that you had in your slides.
Another way.
Yeah. Oh.
Let me go back.
So you decided not to go to Hampton, huh?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's the one. So actually, no, the one before we have the map.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So one thing that we are trying to do here at College of Marin within Marin County is rebuild the pipeline, and from K-12 to college, and you mentioned in, I think it was the earlier slides, about engaging with stakeholders and make sure that. So there are two questions I have for you. One is, from a faculty perspective, where these stakeholders come from, right? So you try to get stakeholders that satisfy specific criteria, right? You have your objectives, and you have 2 examples of your research, right? So how do you do that? And the second question I have is, how do you decolonize a curriculum, right? Because you brought in race in the biomedical research and some specific topics, and I'm trying to do the same in physics and astronomy, for example, right? And there are some examples I can bring in, right? So the inventor of the UV detectors and so on, but that's very like scratching the surface, right? So the 2 parts of 2 questions, probably I should have said, but the stakeholders, and then this part where we want to bring race and ethics into the science curriculum. What is your your point on this 2 aspects?
Yeah, when I think about stakeholders, I was actually just recently listening to ASEE. They actually had a webinar talking about trying to develop meaningful partnerships with HBCUs, HSIs, MSIs, and PWIs. And one of the biggest things they said is making sure that the stakeholder is valued and that they're put at the forefront, especially coming from Duke, which is a very top tier research intensive university. When it comes with, I have this great idea I want to pitch to an HBCU or another institution, making sure that the institution sees themselves as being valuable and not just a pipeline for diverse students. And so I think when it comes to looking at stakeholders, looking at them as an equal partner and saying, I see what value you have, and let's see how our resources can merge together. So it is a little bit challenging to pinpoint, who is that one person who is going to be your gatekeeper and who's going to be able to advocate for you in those meetings. So I definitely can understand it is very difficult to find. But I think a lot of it could be possibly looking at previous, if there are any awards or grants, or kind of just understanding who is already trying to do certain efforts, maybe in isolation, and trying to leverage that as, I see you're doing this, I would love to do something similar, but I want to respect what you already have. Is there any way that we can merge together and create something novel together? And so a lot of that's really trying to see if there's a need that's already going on, or even if it's, I'm going to partner at this institution way over here, and we're just going to have it, targeting 2 different groups across 2 different geographical spaces, in case they're not, a local area or a local school district. So it does take time, but that would be my best bet, especially from learning. A lot of it's, putting yourself as a backseat, acknowledging what we can do, but making sure that each person is valued. So that way, as you move forward, even that's making a formal MOU, so memorial of understanding, so we know what we're each bringing to the table, what our expectancies are when it comes to applying for this proposal or this grant. And then your second question talked about, decolonizing curriculum. I think it's definitely challenging to figure out, how can I really embed it so, it's not just like, oh, we're talking about this one person because it's Black History Month, or, it's Hispanic Heritage Month, but really making it so it's already known. I know a lot of it is a lot of the way that we present it, a lot of it's presenting it in this air of this is common knowledge. Like when you're, instead of asking the question, why does diversity matter? We should almost be at a space where we move past that, where I'm telling you, this is what happened. And I'm also mentioning, their race, their gender, their identity within this document to show that, it's more than just about, this one Black person invented this, they could have been a Black person, but they could have had, many other intersecting identities as well. So really trying to promote, this is this person, this is what being able to see, and we're going to keep it moving, but promoting it in a sense where it is valued, but also there's multiple areas to value that person off of, is how I would say about decolonizing. It is a process. I know I'm still grappling with myself about how can we be intentional. So it's not just one little section at the bottom or this one little, how does this relate? And so I'm still working on ways to make it a more accessible and comfortable topic, because sometimes you don't want to be in those uncomfortable conversations with students. Well, why does this matter? Well, why are you telling me I should study this person? And sometimes it can be intimidating, and also just well, how do I express it? But I need to be how to have those conversations. And so a lot of it is I'm still learning myself, I guess, is a short answer, but I think a lot of it is actually trying to push and promote that this is something that I want to be valued throughout the course, without it being this whole separate diversity in engineering course to the side, or diversity in physics, but kind of showing, that they're people. They're not just scientists, they're more than this monolithic group. We're more than just good with math and science. We're more than just, having a calculator. Like, we have more to us than what might be captured in a snapshot or a blog, is how I've been trying to push against a lot of the colonizing and trying to deconstruct a lot of those forms.
Thank you. Other questions, comment? We only have a few minutes left, but I don't know if any of the other faculty here want to chip in, or any students.
I do have a question. This is related to your coming role that you're beginning next month, and congrats, by the way. That's really a solid impact at a department that will benefit from your strong perspective. One of the conversations that's coming up about the pipeline, as Dr. Nino mentioned, sometimes the pipeline is down at the end and we're looking at the upcoming students. What might your thought be on the upper end, right? Where faculty can come in, and having a faculty member who's very influential and whose voice is meaningful, but also represents a diverse perspective, can have such an impact, not just on the students, but also on fellow faculty. I'm wondering if you have some experiences or anecdotes or kind of some thoughts to share with, like, our campus, or what you would share on your campus as to how, as a colleague, or even an administrator, you can have an impact in that way.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is really trying to promote more champions of diversity, or diversity change agents. Like, even though you might not look a certain way, you can still be an ally, or even a helpful resource in what I'm trying to do, or what I'm trying to partner to do. Because even I know, thinking about students, a lot of students and people as ourselves, we have these invisible backpacks that we carry with us. Some things you see, some things you don't see, some things you'll never ever see, and some things we don't even know ourselves. And so I think when it comes to, especially when the faculty role, when it comes to how can we be of assistance, I think a lot of it is really being intentional. A lot of it is, okay, if I really want to increase the number of students who are coming to, this institution, what can I do in my capacity? And I think a lot of that, especially when you're thinking about engineering, it's breaking down a lot of misconceptions. I know one thing when I was teaching, a lot of it was like, students would be like, oh, I'm not good at math. And I'd be like, well, why aren't you good at math? And they'd be like, well, my parents say they're not good at math, so I must not be good at math. And I'm like, wow, this is a third grader telling me they're not good at math. I can only imagine later on. So a lot of it is retraining and relearning to have this growth mindset, that even though this might be like this, I can still make effective change. And if I don't know how to make effective change, let me reach out to somebody who might already be doing effective change and see how I can partner with them to help them. Or just be a form of support. It doesn't have to necessarily be, oh, I'm going to be a co-PI, or I'm going to be financially invested in what you're doing, but I want to let you know I see what you're doing and I support. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know. If I can forward this contact out for this summer camp you have going on. And so a lot of it is almost breaking down what you might think of, quote unquote, when you think of help, but help can be a small email, it can be a small letter, it can just be a small text message saying, keep up the hard work. And I think, while we, of course, we want, more action behind it, and sometimes it can be pressure to perform, pressure to publish. Sometimes it could be these small instances just to promote awareness of what different people are doing. And so I think faculty definitely have a great big role. I think of engineering culture, a lot of it, students, they see it, and in order to fit in, they adopt those standards and practices, whether they identify with them or not. And unfortunately, a lot of those cultural norms, it's coming from faculty expectation. So a lot of it is, as faculty start to have more conversations that, might be uncomfortable, really trying to move away from a safe space, but a brave space where you're encouraged to push yourself and to have these conversations. I know one thing that we've been working on at Duke, because I've started working part-time a little bit, was, trying to train myself as a facilitator to be able to have some of these conversations. So I know when it comes to thinking about, oh, we want to show a movie, and let's not just show the movie, but let's have a conversation. Let's have a dialogue after, really talk, let's process together. Or even let's start the process here and let's come back to it in a week or two. And then we can come back together and process some more if you feel like it, because some people don't always want to process in a group. They might want to be separate, but creating a space where if you want to have those conversations, this is a zone where we're going to push you. And it is okay. It is not to attack you. It is not to hurt your feelings. It is to promote more awareness of who you are and the people around you and the space that you're in and the space that you might unintentionally take up sometimes. And so I think that's where a lot of it, where I see in my role of having people be aware of their own implicit biases, and then also how they are interacting in a moving, organic ecosystem that's filled with people and items, but it's not the static one structure of a school, is what I think about.
That's fantastic. And it seems like we need to talk about NSF grants, Karis.
Oh yes,
So
no, definitely.
I'll let you settle in, and then
Yeah.
we'll share ideas. And I think there is a lot of material for a nice, interesting educational research grant at the horizon.
Oh yes.
So I want to thank you so much. I don't know if there are more questions. Please speak up at the moment, but I don't want to take more time. Karis is on the East Coast, so it's already kind of late. Karis, thank you very much for being with us today. It's been an honor to have you here, and good luck with everything that's coming forward and your great achievements coming. I'm pretty sure, and I reserve the rights to invite you again to hear how that goes and at Duke in a year or so from now. But again, thank you very much. All I say, has been a great pleasure having you here. And as I said, this has been recorded for our own personal Canvas space, only accessible to our students, but it's also on the YouTube for everybody else. Again, thank you. I don't know if Paul, you want to have closing remarks, or we are good? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Nino, but especially thank you, Karis, for sharing your perspective from the multiple hats that you've been wearing and will continue to wear. I know I was taking copious notes because a lot of what you're speaking was relevant to our students, to our staff, and our faculty and administration. So thanks for bringing all those perspectives up, and again, strengthening and enriching the STEM speaker series. I believe I'm speaking for all of us. I have a personal plan to go through some of these YouTube videos and pull out these real memorable quotes. So we'll let you know when that happens. We'll get your permission to share those with the campus.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Karis. Thank you, everybody, for participating. Again, the next STEM speaker is Emily Fox, Dr. Fox, on Monday. And have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Professor
Thank you.
C, I have a quick question, but it's more about astronomy.
Yeah, David, maybe we can, you can send me an email maybe?
Sure, that works.
Okay.
Can I just ask the doctor, what high school did you go to?